This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH.
Coming up on this weekend's This Week in Agribusiness, wheat growers deal with a flood of news while they try to get the crop out. Hello, everybody. I'm Mike Pearson. Thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. We'll be joined by Max Armstrong later on in the program. But first, we're going to talk about the wheat market. There's been news out of Eastern Europe. We'll talk with Dale Durkoltz in the market segment about how that is changing the economics of the feed grain markets. But we're also looking at wheat growers here in the United States. Winter wheat growers in Kansas struggling to get their crop out. Joining us now for an update is Aaron Harries. He serves as the Vice President of Research and Operations at Kansas Wheat. And Aaron, thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you.
From what I understand, it has been a challenge for Kansas wheat growers getting this winter wheat crop out. Aaron, fill us in. How far behind are Kansas growers with this year's harvest?
We are about two and a half weeks behind our normal harvest pace here in Kansas. It seems like we did a 180 from drought right into rainy season. Unfortunately, how we like to end droughts in Kansas apparently is by having rain during wheat harvest. So, farmers are appreciative of the rain, but the harvest has lingered on. We really should have been finished a couple of weeks ago in the northwest corner of Kansas, where the harvest wraps up and moves into eastern Colorado. But repeated rains almost every night since the end of May have really slowed things down this year.
You said it's been a 180, and Aaron, that sounds like the best description. The state of Kansas, according to the Drought Monitor, is still gripped with drought, and that's a drought that your growers have been dealing with for, was it 3 years this summer?
Yeah, it will be 3 years. If folks remember last year, the 2022 crop was actually very small. It was only 240 million bushels compared to our 5-year average around 330 million bushels. So this crop in 2023 is really the climax of the drought, so to speak, when USDA is predicting only 208 million bushels. So we have literally gone from drought to rain overnight. There are some parts of western Kansas that have received more rain in the last 2 months than they have in the prior 2 years.
That is an incredible statistic, and no doubt that is impacting the crop that's out there in the field. I assume, Aaron, that the expectation was for a shorter crop given the dryness. What has this rain at harvest done to the crop out there in the field?
It has added a few bushels, especially to the later maturing wheat. So we have an annual wheat tour where we travel around the state in Kansas every year in May, and the tour group estimates a production number, and back in the middle of May that number was only 179 million bushels. So being at 208 million bushels, it's still a very small crop historically, but that rain did help us a little bit. Now it's kind of contributing to a little bit of problems with the harvest process. Every time we get rain, the weeds like to grow faster, and that competes with the wheat in the field. And rain has a tendency to drop the test weight on wheat, so a little bit of a quality impact there.
For growers who maybe aren't wheat producers, what does test weight mean, Aaron?
It's essentially the weight of the kernel, the density of the kernel. So test weight is measured, it's really a volume measure. And those kernels are nice and dense and heavy, indicates that they're really good milling quality. They're nice, big, fat wheat kernels, and millers really like that because it's easy to mill the flour out of that. So we like to see test weights normally would be about 60 pounds per bushel. And with this rainfall, we're seeing test rates fall down into that 57, 58 pounds per bushel. So that's kind of the decrease in that quality factor that we're seeing because of the extra rainfall on the wheat that is ripe and waiting to be harvested.
Well, Aaron, those harvesters will be back out in the field. When do you expect harvest to wrap up across Kansas?
We certainly hope by the end of the month that harvest will be done. There is some harvest happening in west central and northwest Kansas, but with our current weather of 100 degrees plus, we should wrap it up pretty quickly.
Lots to watch in the months ahead. That's Aaron Harries, Vice President of Research and Operations at Kansas Wheat. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. The Firestone Ag Dealer Network offers you the support, inventory, and resources you need. Visit firestoneag.com to find your local certified dealer. It's time to take a look at the markets. Joining us this week is Dale Dirkholtz of Grain Cycles. And Dale, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, good to be up here today.
This past week, we've seen a lot more interest in the global grain trade on the situation between Russia and Ukraine. Dale, why is the trade watching this so closely this week?
Well, what happened here, we had renewed attacks, I think it was about a week ago now, on Odessa, but then they came back and they also attacked some Ukrainian ports that are on the Danube, which really gets into a dicey situation because right across the river is Romania, and that's a NATO partner. So everybody's really kind of thrown into the thing. Are we going to get any shipments at all out of the Black Sea because they've now shut down Odessa? But now, you know, there's a worry we won't even get shipments off the Danube coming out of Ukraine, and they're worried that we might see things backed up somewhat. And Russia's even hinted they may do a total blockade on the whole Black Sea. So who knows where we're at in terms of exports coming out of the Ukraine in the year ahead.
Dale, as we think about exports coming out of the Black Sea region, we know they've been in a war this past year. Production is expected to be down. Is it going to have much fundamental impact if ships can't leave that region?
Yeah, it does have fundamental impact. More in the corn than the wheat, as some people might be surprised. Ukraine, historically, yeah, they do raise wheat, they do export wheat, and they're a significant player in the world, but really corn is the big item that comes out of Ukraine when you look at movement out of the Black Sea area in general. And Russia has been the dominant producer of wheat and the dominant exporter of wheat. But depending on how this whole situation goes, some people will start to ask, are we really going to shut down the Black Sea totally? In other words, start blockading Russian shipments from coming out. And that just throws a whole level of turmoil more into the wheat market than anything else.
Well, you mentioned Ukraine's import in the global corn market. Dale, as you look ahead, have we seen any export partners of Ukraine buy corn from the U.S. since all this started?
Haven't really seen much so far at this point yet. You kind of keep your eye on China. Part of the thing that's masking this is right now you got to remember we have a huge crop, second crop corn coming out of Brazil, and that's going to continue to flush its way into the world pipeline as we go forward, although we're hearing down in Brazil some farmers are kind of sitting back and not marketing, and because prices interior in Brazil have gotten so cheap. So we may see some temporary disruption, but basically we just keep pushing those shipments off over into the beginning of our new crop. So, you know, that doesn't bode well for new crop out of the U.S. as far as corn exports.
Given that concern is out there, Dale, are you aggressive right now on new crop corn sales?
Not so much at this point just yet. I think you got to watch this thing real closely. You know, when you look at the corn and you look at the corn export business and you look at corn prices per se, the big thing you're watching is really the weather. And, you know, if we get a shift in the weather from this warm, dry period that we're in right now, if we start to revert back to something more normal or a little bit more moisture, that will be the item I think that will really kind of cap the corn market. But where we are today, $5.50, we could still reach for maybe something on $6 on December corn, but I get to $6 December corn, I go, bets are off. I don't think there's a lot more upside in this game.
All right, Dale, wheat market, you mentioned that's been volatile this past week. We're watching that Russian situation. Where do you expect prices to move in the short term?
Boy, that's probably the nightmare to try to figure out, but you know, I think if we can take a leap in here and move Chicago over 8, you could maybe move it back to 9. If you want to look at wheat, Kansas City's still going to be carrying a premium because of the short hard red crop itself, and maybe up into the 9.50 or maybe even into 10. But you know, that game there, you're really watching this Black Sea thing real closely because that's really all the volatility. But you have to remember with wheat, fundamentally in the world, it's got the better fundamental argument of virtually all the three major grains.
Lots to watch as this year goes on. We'll be back for more with Dale Dirkholtz of Grain Cycles. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. Harvey Firestone invented the first pneumatic farm tire, forever changing what it means to farm hard. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more about this history and tire solutions for today. We're back talking markets with Dale Dirkholtz of Grain Cycles. And Dale, this past week we had a couple of big announcements from the Federal Reserve. We saw another increase in the interest rate, and we saw the U.S. economy perform fairly well. Where do you think we're going on this inflation issue?
The inflation issue, I think we're turning up. I watch commodity indices real closely, and they're just kind of approximate thing to try to understand what's going on or what may be ahead with inflation. In the year of 2023, we were due for a 3-year low in commodity indices themselves, and specifically you get back one of those things seasonally tends to be, interestingly enough, around 4th of July. In other words, in the month of May, June, or July. And it does look like that low in June might end up being the 3-year low, and we've turned these indices back up. We've got to also tell people and make them understand that, you know, these indices tend to be more heavily weighted over into the energy sector. So that means ahead we've probably got higher energies coming, and as long as they come, we're going to have inflation tend to bubble and percolate upward, and it's going to keep pressure on the Federal Reserve. What do you do with policy? Do you keep raising rates?
All right, lots to watch. Dale, I want to get your perspective here on the soybean market. Again, we've seen that same sort of volatility as we've seen in corn and wheat this past week. We've also seen some more foreign buyers come into the soybean market. Does that leave you bullish as you look out for the remainder of the summer?
Not bearish, let's put it that way. I don't know if I'd want to say I'm really bullish. The one thing I do know in the soybean complex, though, that people need to understand, I think they need to change their focus away from the bean oil in leadership terms over to the bean meal. The EP announcement we had back June's on the new renewable volume obligations basically kind of capped maybe what we're going to be seeing as far as potential in the renewable diesel industry. It's not going to decline, but it's going to grow at a slower pace. So it puts the fundamental support in the bean complex back into the meal itself. And that fits in well because with the crop we had in Argentina this last year, you know, U.S. and or Brazil is still going to have to make up for an awful lot of the deficit of bean meal or quasi-bean meal coming out of Argentina flowing into the world pipeline. So I think keeping an eye on bean meal is going to be a real key to understanding beans. But right now, I've been kind of playing the game, trying to figure out, you know, do we get much over 14? Do we take the 14, I think 48 high out of the November contract? If we do that, then we shift up into 15. But when you get to 15, you're getting into what I call rarefied territory. It's called be careful. And like in corn, weather's really the big variable at this point, you know, because in the month of August is when we really make or break a bean crop itself. And so if weather calms down, cools off, we get some moisture, we can still have some really good bean yields.
Dale, corn, beans, wheat, any of those three classes are you looking at 24 sales in right now?
As I go through the latter part of summer here at this point and we get this bounce and rebound, I think you have to look ahead at those. Corn, interestingly enough, maybe more so even than beans and wheat. Wheat, we've put in 6 and 9 year lows, it looks to me like now, over the last 2 years. Beans, we're going to put in a 3-year low this year, and so that says we'll be up, but I have a 2-year low then due next year. But corn has a 24-month, 26-month low due in 2024. So I think beans and corn, you've always got to be on the bubble with the rallies and the strength here. Do I start marketing 24 crop?
All right, Dale, in the cattle complex, had the cattle inventory report come out last week. Was it surprising to the trade?
I don't know that it was really surprising to the trade because of some of the things going on. You know, we had the beef cow herd liquidated down again a little bit deeper at this point in time. And, you know, when you look back at the various breakdowns of steers, heifers, calves, etc., you know, our feeder supply is going to be tight, which argues that feeder prices are going to be relatively robust when we start looking ahead on into the fall and maybe into the winter. But feeder prices are also a function of the corn market. If the corn market stays high, it diminishes feeder demand, it can cap it. If the corn market starts to turn down and decline, you know, that's really a sign that, you know, feeder prices are going to get pretty silly and moving up. So, you know, kind of watching the feeders more than anything else at this point in the beef complex.
Lots to watch. It's going to be another interesting year. That's Dale Durkoltz of Grain Cycles.
Good seeing you today.
Colby Ag Tech is brought to you by Copperhead Ag Products. Visit copperheadag.com for more information. With that crop growing in the fields this time of year, it's essential that it gets all the nutrients it needs. But adding too many nutrients can be costly. So growers need to know what the nutrient loads are in those plants. Typically, that's been a time-consuming process, but some new technology that Chad Colby shares with us speeds it up considerably.
How farmers can really start to analyze what's happening in their field. You need real-time results. We've talked about it from an imagery standpoint for probably the last 20 years. Talk about this new tool where a guy can go out and get real-time leaf samples.
Well, the power of the Leaf Tech Ag tissue scanner is we actually can go stand in the field. And we've just done it here real time. We've taken a sample, and within 3 to 5 minutes by scanning, we get the answer from the cloud and the farmer can take action right away.
So Mike, I noticed when I used the machine, one thing I was kind of interested about, I could go up and down a corn plant or a cotton plant, whatever I wanted with this, and take multiple scans, but how long does it take to get the data back after it's processed?
Well, it's very quick. It only takes about 20 seconds to get the scan, and then in 3 to 5 minutes, you're getting the data back right in the field that you can take action on.
Wow, talk about what crops this machine will work in now.
Yeah, so currently the technology is being developed for corn, soy, and cotton as the major crops. And then we're also working in tomatoes, alfalfa, and wheat as we go along. So it's just a matter of time, and many of the crops will be available in the next 6 to 12 months.
You know, the big question producers are going to ask is the cost. Talk a little bit about the model with this machine and how you guys have structured that.
Yeah, so you know, you send your samples to the lab, and that costs anywhere from $15 to $50 depending on the sample, the time it takes, and so forth. So this is being offered as a subscription service, software as a service. So there's a yearly fee that'll be paid. The nice thing about that is if there's any updates to the technology, you'll be able to receive those. We send the device back in to the company, and they'll send you a new one with the updates as part of that service.
Talk a little bit how producers can learn more about this machine.
There's a small run this year, limited, and then it will grow in production into the next year. We see this technology being used by crop consultants, by ag retailers, in research, those kinds of things. And then there's going to be farmers out there that say, hey, I need this technology. You know, a farmer spends maybe $6 an acre every 2 or 3 years to do soil sampling. If you look, that's a couple dollars an acre every year. So with this technology, I think between the farmer as ag consultant, it's going to be one that'll be implemented very quickly to help make those real-time decisions.
And finally, I know we've got the Farm Progress Show coming up. I'm certain you'll get to see this there.
Yes, we will. We'll be there in multiple booths, and actually in the Farm Next booth, John and his team will be there also. And then you can come and see us at Newfields Ag there at the Farm Progress Show.
For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Fascinating technology. Thank you, Chad. Folks, that's the LeafTech Ag Scanner. Stay with us. We'll have an update from our friends at BASF with another of the Plan Smart, Grow Smart when we return. Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Folks, it's that time of the show where we're going to turn things over to Charlie Behrens to learn about the agricultural production across these 50 states here in America.
The United States of America can be very different from one state to another, but one thing every state has in common is agriculture.
Hey everybody, I'm Charlie Behrens, and welcome to the Agricultural States of America, where we explore the agriculture from different states and hopefully give you some more appreciation for all the great things that farmers are producing across America. Now today we're headed north to another Midwestern state with a great big sky and an even bigger agricultural industry. I'm talking about North Dakota. Yes, the Dakota that sleeps in the top bunk. Now when I say North Dakota, what do you think of? And please don't say wood chipper.
Oh, you betcha, yeah.
Yeah. Say farmers. North Dakota has over 26,000 farmers utilizing more than 39 million acres, or 90% of the land for farming. Now, North Dakota is known as the breadbasket of the world. Other states make the same claim, but North Dakota is up to the challenge with a long list of crops yielding big numbers. Now, just for some quick stats, North Dakota produces 39% of the nation's dry beans, and more specifically, 68% of the pinto beans, 84% of the nation's canola crop, 71% of the flaxseed, 45% of the sunflowers, and 19% of rye. That's a lot of fiber. Big thanks to North Dakota for keeping this great nation regular. North Dakota is also the top wheat producing state with 17% of the total U.S. market share, which is significant considering how many major states are growing wheat. Oh, and North Dakota is #1 in producing honey as well. In fact, 26% of all the nation's honey comes from North Dakota, where more than 300 licensed beekeepers produce over 38 million pounds of that sweet stuff every single year. Now keep in mind, honeybees are far more important to our nation's food supply than their honey alone. In general, honeybees pollinate 80% of all our crops. As a result, 1/3 of all our food depends directly or indirectly on honeybee pollination. So another way to look at this is that 1 of every 3 bites of food we eat exists only because of honeybees. Now, in one case in particular, the majority of all the honeybees in North Dakota, plus bees from other parts of the Midwest, are transported to California for a few weeks every single year. These bees are used to help pollinate California's almond trees when they are in bloom. Bees can't survive year-round in that part of California, so they then have to be transported back and forth for those specific seasons. It's just like snowbirds. In fact, some people call these snow bees. And by some people, I mostly mean me, but I think it's a good name and it should stay. Anyway, North Dakota is a major grower of soybeans, corn, potatoes, sugar beets, barley, and oats as well. At this point, you may have noticed that I haven't mentioned any livestock production, unless you count the bees. And I know some ranchers from North Dakota are probably scratching their heads right now, but don't worry, I did not forget about you. To be fair, 85% of all egg production in North Dakota are crops, but 15% does come from livestock, and most of that comes from cattle. In fact, North Dakota is home to more than 1.8 million head of cattle. That's more than 2 cattle for every 1 person. Just imagine if those cattle could vote. Now, just to wrap your head around how much beef we're talking about here, and vegans, you may want to put the earmuffs on. Good. Okay, 1 head of cattle is about 2,100 hamburgers. So we're talking about 3.8 billion quarter pounders. That is a whole lot of cholesterol. Now, before we go, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to North Dakota's pig, sheep, dairy, and poultry farmers, and those ranchers helping strengthen the bison herd. By the way, if you see a bison out and about, don't get too close, or you might not be around to see the rest of these episodes of the Agricultural States of America. They're dangerous, seriously, stay away. All right, that's all the time we have for now, but you can always go to pivotbio.com/agstates, click on the show icon to explore more about the agriculture of your favorite states and test your knowledge to win great prizes and more. I'm Charlie Behrens, and we will see you next time on the Agricultural States of America.
Well, Charlie, thanks as always for that look at North Dakota. It's one of my favorite states. Folks up in North Dakota, I've had the chance to travel up there many, many times, usually during the winter months, it seems, is when I get up to North Dakota, and I'm always amazed. A state that cold can have people that warm. But North Dakota is interesting. Charlie talked about all the different crops that they have the opportunity to grow up there, and I have had the opportunity recently to talk with John Sandbakken. He's the head of the National Sunflower Association, which is headquartered right there in central North Dakota in the city of Mandan, and he and I talked about the impact on the sunflower market from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Sunflower prices last year nearly doubled, moving up to $40 per ton. Now, of course, they are starting to pull back a little bit. John and I were talking about production expectations this year, and he mentioned that many growers have become intrigued by sunflowers. We'd seen throughout the Central Plains, folks had worked them out of the rotation in recent years, but profitability in that sector is pulling growers back in. John mentioned that acreage is increasing across the country, and we continue to see growers looking for more and more opportunities to diversify their crop mix. And for some of those growers, sunflowers are proving to be one of the best options. Later on in the program, folks, we're going to be throwing it over to Max Armstrong to talk with our friends from BASF. Max has been working on the Plant Smart, Grow Smart series with BASF for some time, and we're going to talk about weed eradication later in this program.
This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. According to industry experts, the 2023 grain crop is the most expensive crop American farmers have ever put in the ground. That makes crop protection all the more important. Recently, Max Armstrong had the chance to sit down with Brady Spangenberg of BASF, and they talked about what all crop protection entails.
Crop protection, of course, includes controlling those weeds out there. Talk with us about Operation Weed Eradication. What is that program?
That's an idea we had to really reinforce the point that when you're looking to control weeds, you need as many tools in the toolbox as possible. This idea of Operation Weed Eradication was born. Cross-industry coalition trying to have a discussion about what is the best way to control weeds year in and year out.
Resistance reared its ugly head quite a few years ago, and it spread. What approach should the grower utilize to try to fight resistance of weeds?
The first thing is to inspect. If resistance isn't always visible when you're driving down the road, so the view from inside the crop is much different than it is from the side of the truck. And so we recommend first and foremost a lot of scouting together with your retail agronomist, your consultant, and your BSF sales rep. Take a look at what's happening out there. Are you having escapes? When are they breaking through the canopy?
You get the feeling resistance isn't going away anytime soon. It's been so doggone stubborn. Is it even a possible goal to think that it could be eradicated, that eradication is possible?
One of the worst ways to control weeds is to do the same thing over and over again. If you're utilizing the same chemistry that you are for your burn down, as you are for your knockdown chemistry, and then coming back with a rescue of the same chemistry, that is a recipe for disaster.
So what would be some of the chemical, cultural, mechanical practices to Operation Weed Eradication?
We have a lot of conversations about what are some of the best management practices for controlling weeds, rotating your chemistries, using chemistries with multiple modes of action, using different chemistries for your burn down than for your residuals, and also keeping a close watch on escapes and managing the total weed seeds in the seed bank. Utilizing this image of eradication to say, if you really want to control weeds, if you really want to make sure that you're not burning out chemistries, that you're not setting yourself up for failure, you need to follow these integrated management practices.
You're really looking at kind of a long-term picture too, are you not? Operation Weed Eradication looks at that picture on down the road as far as trying to manage resistance.
Looking far down the road is something that the farming industry specializes in. I think leaving a lasting legacy, right? Building up the soil profile. Those are things that every grower and everyone in ag can relate to.
Thank you, Max, and thanks to Brady Spangenberg of BASF for taking the time to talk to us about crop protection. Folks, you can learn more and view all the Plan Smart, Grow Smart episodes online at plansmartgrowsmart.com.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
It's time to take a look at the weather. Meteorologist Greg Solier joins us now. And Greg, Pacific Northwest has been dry. Are they expected to get any more moisture?
Well, kind of a couple of hit and miss showers at times this time of the year. They're on the northern extent of the hot ridge, which primarily this summertime season, it's parked itself over the Corn Belt, parts of the plains, but there's been a western flank, and so you do get these dry-based, more lightning-based thunderstorms across areas from the Four Corners on northward. We continue with this ridge riding ring of fire northwest to southeast upper air wind flow. Disturbances come out of the Pacific Northwest through Big Sky, slide to the south and southeast, and this is where you get the weather havoc going in points south and southeast. There will be a couple of fronts that move ashore. We may spark a couple of showers across Washington State and Oregon, but the drier spell of weather and the heat too has pushed the back 40 winter wheat, for example, to maturity, about 50% complete on the harvesting across Oregon. We do get a push of some cooler air, beginning to see signs here through the Canadian Prairie and parts of the polar region of a pattern shift for areas east of the divide here in the coming weeks. Southwestern parts of the country, we've had some shower activity, some monsoon moisture, very disappointing. Southeast Arizona, southwest New Mexico. Again, a couple of these dry-based thunderstorms, the western end of the hot ridge across the Four Corners, southern valleys of California. Unbeknownst to the weather gods, well, there's low pressure, but that's because of heat across the Sacramento Valley. Again, the northern extent of that jet stream pattern, getting a couple of active thunderstorm clusters across Nebraska. Too hot to make rain up aloft across Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas early in the week. Later in the week, a little more east and southeast movement on some of the heat. It's back into Kansas, 100 to 105 for a little while. The heat eases across the southwest, where we do get a couple of monsoon showers and thunderstorms in that part of the country late in the week, Mike.
Well, Greg, the central corn belt, as you mentioned, has been baking under those high temps. Do you see any moisture coming this next week?
And very oppressive humidity as well. You know, during much of this season, we've had heat, minus the humidity, the moisture, the dew points, and at times very humid and damp, but temperatures have been in check. So yeah, it's been a good old-fashioned heat wave weather pattern. The northern extent here easing down to the south and moving back to the west temporarily, as once again these west northwesterly winds ride the hot ridge over the central and southern plains, the ring of fire set up, if you will. Note the cooler air building across the southern Canadian prairie. It is on the move here over the next 10 to 15 days. We'll talk about it in the longer range stuff, but still their propensity to generate thunderstorms over the northern high plains and upper Midwest, south and southeast, heavy and severe, all or nothing, with once again temperatures for a while middle to late parts of the week pushing back plus 90 or 95 degrees. So with that in mind, over the Delta and the southwestern states, southern plains, a little monsoon moisture, Baja, the hot weather to Texas, a couple of showers and thunderstorms, Delta region, high humidity. Those dew point values even into the Midwest have been in the 70s, and they'll continue as such through the southern plains. Too hot to make rain here. Western flank has some monsoon moisture into the southwestern part of the country, and maybe the thunderstorm with a rapid crop growth and development going on from the Delta onto the east.
What are you watching as we look farther east? Greg, what are Americans going to see towards the coast?
Well, some relief from the heat and humidity. Unfortunately, we can't shut the rain pattern down across this absolutely ravaged area of the northeast and New England. We get a couple of more showers and thunderstorms. Western Corn Belt, note the behavior of some of these storms. They're heavy and severe in some spots. Others, you get a couple of drops of rain, and that is that at least the heat and humidity ease somewhat over the eastern Corn Belt, but it's back into play, and a couple of more of these disturbances over the top of the warm front and the ridge with showers and thunderstorms along with heat and humidity. Rapid crop growth and development, but more stress and strain at night. Those temperatures don't ease down at night as well. A couple of more showers still lingering across the northeast and New England. Through the middle part of the week across the southeastern states, scattered showers and thunderstorms across the Carolinas down through Florida. The heat continues on and humidity across the entire area. And once again, note the tropical Atlantic, the Gulf, pretty quiet. Bath-like water temperatures low to mid-90s as the heat and a couple of showers and thunderstorms hit and miss continue in the southeast.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Meteorologist Greg Solier joins us now with a look at what's to come in the weeks ahead. And Greg, what do you expect to see from a rainfall perspective next week?
It's the ring of fire, the ridge riding setup that continues on for another week or so. And then we do see signs of a little more significant pattern shift. But in the meantime, disturbances originate in the Pacific Northwest. They move into the northern plains. They tap into the northern and eastern flank of the hot dome of high pressure where we can't get anything going in the moisture department here. But as storms recur and repeat and train on out, you get these all or nothing outbreaks, complete with heavy and severe. But again, general modest improvement to the dryness and drought. Not good news here across the northeast and New England. Good news as long as we stay away from the severe weather potential across the Corn Belt. More stress and strain here and more downpours of rain as well, with daytime heating over the southeastern part of the country. We'll dot parts of the southwest and the Sierra with a couple of showers and thunderstorms. It's kind of a disappointing monsoon season so far.
Well, Greg, you mentioned a pattern shift coming in August. Do you see that on an example on the week of August 7th?
We do. And we'll see that here late in the next 7 to 10 days. And then by the time we get into and just beyond the first week of August, beginning to lay out some cool air over the southern Canadian prairie, northern plains. But in contrast, the atmosphere still says it's mid-summertime. And here is a little piece of the hot dome. Now over the southeastern part of the country, boy, these water temperatures are incredibly warm here. But look at the expanse of warmth from southern New England back across the western states, and the compaction of temperatures, the isotherms here, the wind strengthen up aloft, and you still get a pretty busy weather pattern relative to mid to late summertime, with a pickup on showers and thunderstorms here, probably heavy and severe across the Corn Belt despite being August, into the northeast of New England, normal precip south plains, southeastern states, across areas west of the divide, back to dry time. No real significant moisture here from a monsoon standpoint. We'll keep an eye on the tropics across the Pacific of no bearing into California.
Greg, as as we get into that week of August 14th, does that cool air push further south?
It does, just incrementally so with each weather system. It makes its presence felt. We'll get one lobe to move off to the northeast into New England, but the warmth then expands. A retrogression, we've talked about that, the westward movement of systems up aloft. And here we are with the heat back into the central and southern plains, parts of the southwest, and above average temperatures over the southeastern part of the country. I know it doesn't look like much of a pattern shift, but it is just from the progression of air masses across North America. So we still get a pretty busy setup with above average moisture for areas of the Corn Belt, the Great Lakes region, the southeastern states, and we'll keep an eye on the tropical Pacific, Mike, for some moisture into the desert southwest.
What are you watching for, Greg, on that last full week of August?
Here is that pattern shift again, and it'll be longer and lasting and locked in here. Look at the degree of cool air. Yes, slower crops growth and development and maturity. Warmth here and over the western part of the country, and you know it's going to get busy here. Pacific Northwest, northern plains into the eastern states and the Atlantic basin as well, getting pretty busy.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
Well, if you've seen an antique tractor that is burned in a shed fire out on a farm, you can recall very vividly, no doubt, it was a sad sight. Sometimes they're hauled away for salvage, and then other times they may be restored. We have an example this weekend in a Max's Tractor Shed brought to you by Mystic Lubricants. Mystic Lubricants producers are made to make it last. Well, an International 1468 is the kind of tractor that you might consider restoring. Sometimes there's a sentimental attachment to a tractor. Sometimes it was just such a great model that guys take a look at it and they say, oh, maybe we can bring that back to life. Well, Fred Becker and his nephew Ben Sterrett in central Illinois, Tower Hill, Illinois, decided to restore this 51-year-old 1468. Take a look at it after it burned. Richard Gregory at Mowequa, Illinois, several years ago had a fire, and that tractor burned. However, Fred and Ben decided they'd work on it. They didn't rush their work. They worked only in the winter time, and over the course of 3 winters, they got that tractor restored, rising from the ashes, that Phoenix did. And you can see the symbol right there on the front of that 1468, made in 1972. Let's see what's selling in the week ahead for Big Iron Auctions. Here's the man, Mark Stock.
Well, hello, Max. As we get into August, we've got some fabulous equipment, a lot of equipment selling from implement dealers across the country. On August 1st, Tractor Central, with various locations across Wisconsin, will be selling 55 items to the highest bidder. A 2017 John Deere 8700 self-propelled forage harvester. They have a Heggie STS-12 self-propelled sprayer. Also on August the 1st is the Mark Goodman retirement sale from Rose Hill, Iowa. 93 items, including a Frontier large round bale retriever, John Deere 6420 mechanical front tractor with a loader. The Bank of Colorado in Fort Morgan, Colorado will sell grain handling equipment, grain roller mills, seed sorters, specialty augers, and grain sorting equipment. The Phil and Pam Smith retirement sale is on August the 3rd. Equipment by Copeland, Kansas. We'll be selling a 2017 John Deere S660 combine with only 851 separator hours. A 2020 John Deere 1725 12-row 30 stack fold planter. All well cared for, low-houred equipment. All the equipment sells to the highest bidder, Max, on BigIron.com.
Our FFA Chapter Tribute is brought to you by Pioneer, developing new generations of seed innovations for new generations of farmers. Pioneer, what's next happens here. And we're proud to get to know that next generation of American agriculturalists. Joining us this week is Owen Neely. He serves as the first vice president for the Missouri FFA. And Owen, thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad I have the opportunity to talk to you all today.
Tell us a little bit about where you grew up. Owen, what's ag like in your corner of Missouri?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from a small town in southwest Missouri called Lockwood. It's about halfway between Springfield and Joplin. In my community, the Lockwood agricultural sphere is definitely all things beef cattle, corn and soybeans. Agriculture is definitely the main economic driver in my community, but one thing that I also appreciate is how it provides a sense of community to all the individuals that play a part in it.
That's a great point, Owen. And as you mentioned, you grew up, of course, on a farm, but what was it that prompted you to join FFA?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my family, joining FFA was the sort of tradition. My mom, my uncle, my grandfather, several of my cousins have been in FFA in high school. So I kind of wanted to honor them and join FFA. And I also wanted to enhance my leadership abilities by getting involved in speeches and other FFA contests to grow as a person.
So you did, of course, climbed through the ranks of leadership. Now you're the first vice president for the Missouri State FFA, Owen. And as you look out to your year of service, what has you excited?
One of the things I'm most excited about is just connecting with more members across our state. A few months ago, I had the opportunity to connect with members at our leadership camp back in June, and I'm just really excited to be able to go out into those chapters and uplift our members' stories, because the heart of our organization is at the local level. So without our members, our organization would not be possible.
That's so true. Owen, as you look to the future, do you hope to have a career in agriculture?
For me personally, production agriculture isn't the career I'm looking for. I'm going to attend the University of Missouri-Columbia, majoring in biochemistry. So I'm looking to pursue a career in rural health so that I can bring healthcare to rural areas to provide mental and physical healthcare to rural people.
That is a need that is apparent across rural America. We wish you the best of luck. Owen Neely, Missouri State FFA. Earlier in the program, I mentioned that farmers this year have put the most expensive grain crop in the ground across the United States of America. With that being the case, many growers are looking for new ways, perhaps to maximize their dollars on their operation. Max had a conversation recently with Paul Sheets about doing exactly that.
Yeah, Mike, producers are always looking at ways, that they can maximize the income from the land. Climate smart agriculture, of course, is something that farmers are thinking about. Climate Smart Ag Originations Director of ADM, Paul Sheets, joins us here this weekend on This Week in Agribusiness. Paul, Regenerations is your program, as I recall, and this isn't the first year for it, is it?
That is correct, Max. Thank you for having me on the show. But we really scaled up our efforts in our ADM Regenerations program last year. We've been working on engaging farmers in a different way to understand the field practices that they ultimately choose and what type of impacts they have on the environment for the better part of the last 10 years. But last year, we were able to sign up over 1.2 million acres across the U.S. that covered almost 2,000 farmers. And we're looking to build off of the work that ourselves and our farmer partners did last year by expanding those goals this year to 2 million acres.
Is there a particular length of contract that you have with the growers? In other words, do they have to be thinking about how long they might be in this program?
No, good question, Max. We understand that these decisions are really difficult. So we want to make our contracts as flexible as possible. So our contracts are all annual. They're 1-year commitments from farmers. We do have a goal of trying to get farmers consistent payments and incentives for practices and outcomes for more than 1 year, but we understand things change at the farm level every single year. So we want to make sure that we're offering something that meets the farmer where they are. So our contracts are all annual, they're all 1-year contracts, and there's several different premium opportunities, both in payments per acre and premium payments on per bushel that they may deliver to an ADM location.
You use that phrase, meets the farmer where they are. Talk a little bit about the practices that might have to be added by the grower. You know, they may already have some in place. Where are you folks on that?
A lot of our programs will incentivize farmers that are early adopters and new adopters as well. So our practice payments cover no-till, fertilizer efficiency programs, and cover crop adoption. But we also have outcomes payments that just takes the farmer's field level decisions and gives them a carbon intensity score. And if they're able to beat the benchmark on those carbon intensity score in some of our locations, they're able to get a premium on the bushels that they deliver to our locations.
I saw that percentage just the other day, and I was a little bit surprised on cover crops that it was that low. I guess personally, I thought maybe it was north of 10% there. You describe a wide geography too, don't you? All the way from Florida to Washington State, where you'll be working with growers.
Yeah, for sure. And we will have programs rolled out in some Canadian provinces as well, 3 to start off with. But we have goals, expanded goals expected for the next couple years as well. So along with all of those states, there are around 60 different ADM locations, and we plan on expanding that over the next couple years as well. So if you're a farmer that's listening today and you don't happen to fall into our geographies that have a program offering, which you can find on our website, that is admadvantage.com/regen, or we have one of our technical assistance partners that helps us collect the data. That's Farmers Business Network. If you have an FBN account or you want to sign up for an FBN account for free.
Paul Sheets, Director of Climate Smart Ag Originations at ADM. Mike, joining us this weekend.
Thank you, Max, and thank you, Paul. Folks, if you've been thinking about incorporating some climate smart ag into your operation, visit the website. Again, that's admadvantage.com/REGEN. Thanks so much for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness, folks. Next week, it's going to be a hot one, so stay cool out there, and we look forward to you joining us right back here, same time, same place, next week.
This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.